Good morning, colleagues. I'm very happy to see everybody here today. Welcome to the 13th IAEG-SDG meeting. It's nice to be able to have this meeting in person after 3 years of a virtual existence. And won't it be nice to not have to say today, you're muted, your camera is off, your connection is not stable. The downside is I actually had to put on a skirt and I'm not in my pajamas, so that's not as good. But seriously, it's been a long 3 years, and I think the group has functioned very efficiently during this period. But virtual does not take the place of in-person conversations, the clarifications you can have when you meet somebody in the corridor. So those connections allow us to clarify and connect. So let's take advantage of our time over the next 2 days, and we have a very busy agenda. So before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Karen, to make a few opening remarks.
Thank you, Kara. Hi, everyone, and welcome to all of you to the 13th IAEG-SDGs meeting. This is the first meeting, in-person meeting after 3 years. So it's really amazing to see you all here. And we are very much looking forward to whole discussions, both during the meeting and in the spaces that we have in the coffee breaks. With that, a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you.
And UNSD is going to make a few opening remarks.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure for my side to welcome you on behalf of UNSD and the team here to this 13th meeting of the IAEG-SDGs. Allow me also to thank colleagues at ESCAP for their support and with the organization of the meeting, but also the generous contribution of the government of Japan that has funded the participation of many of us to this meeting, both for this IAG meeting and the expert group meeting that will happen at the end of the week. I also would like to thank colleagues at UNDP, both at headquarters and here, who also provided some support with the logistic aspects. So always a very collaborative effort. This is a very special group. Since 2015, we've had, I think, quite an interesting journey. Many of us remember we were in this very same building when we had a very intense consultation coming up with the first list of indicators, not the final version, but the first sort of concrete list. The room was packed, hundreds of people and people standing in the back of the room. Very, very intense process. I think we've achieved a lot, perhaps beyond expectations. Many were skeptical that this group would deliver a list of indicators, and look what we've done. And it's been a long time since we had a possibility to be together in person. Many of us haven't been in the same room with this community since Addis in 2019, when we had the 10th meeting. And we were dealing, back then, we were ready to submit the 2020 comprehensive review, and now we are ready to start the process for the next comprehensive review in 2025. We also had endorsed the new CCSA IAEG-SDG guidelines principles for the data flow, which I think also is a huge achievement of this group. So a lot to be proud of. This last 3 years, as we've heard, we worked under unusual circumstances. And I think we had some challenges, but as we said many, many times, the COVID pandemic has also brought a lot of opportunities. And I think this group in particular and this community has done a lot. We launched so many new work streams, so many new areas of work to improve SDG data. We launched global processes like the discussion on data governance, data stewardship, new data sources. We have in a few days an expert group meeting on citizen data, a very important new work stream that will contribute to filling some of the gaps in the SDGs. So a lot to be proud of. Also, we continued our series of SDGs report and SDG report, what we call the glossy report. I think you've seen the cover earlier on the screen. So this group has made that possible. Every year we've been able to produce that report, and this year yet again it was a great success. And it's really because of the custodian agencies that do all the work that we can really produce that report. So overall, we've worked I would say, very well together, and even some of the tension, I would say, that was there, you know, with the data flow issues that we face, you know, between national and global. A lot of that has been addressed and somehow resolved, and we see custodian agencies and countries working together really in a very collaborative and very efficient way. So that's also something of which this group should be very, very proud. So we have a very important year ahead of us. This year we've heard, and we had already some discussion around that. As I said, we'll start preparing for a new comprehensive review, the 25 comprehensive review, that's the last. And we are approaching the deadline for SDGs really fast. But also we have a very important year because of the 23 SDG summit. And we know the expectations from the policy side are quite high in terms of what we can offer in terms of global reporting, products and updates, and even, you know, perhaps forecasting and giving an assessment of where we are and how much off track we are in achieving the SDGs. So enough from my side with all the blah, 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 but I think we have more important things to talk about. Again, thank you so much for being here. Great to be in person, and I wish you all a great meeting. Thank you. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So we'll get started with item 2, updates on the high-level political forum and the SDG global reports. We'll start with the Sustainable Development Goals report, and Yonggi Min will walk us through that.
Thank you, Cara. So I would like to maybe talk about a little bit on the high-level political forum and the GA next year, and the focus on the SDG development goals report. Next slide, please. And so in 2023, the high-level political forum will take place from 10 to 19 July 2023. And the ministerial segment is 17 to 19, the 3 days in July. And the theme is accelerating the recovery from COVID-19 and the full implementation of the 2030 agenda. There's 5 goals under review, which is goal 6, 7, 9, 11 and goal 17, and but we encourage the voluntary national report cover all the SDGs. Next slide, please. So we know the high-level political forum meets each year on the UN Economic and Social Council for 8 days, and every 4 years under the auspices of the General Assembly for 2 days. So the next meeting under the GA will be held in September 2023, and as Francesca just mentioned, we refer to as a SDG summit, where the heads of the states will come together to reconfirm their commitment to 2030 agenda and announce new initiatives to accelerate its implementation. Next slide, please. And so far, there's 291 voluntary national review has been conducted to date. Last year, we have 44 countries present their voluntary national review, and total 187 countries have presented, with 87 countries have conducted more than once. And there are 9 countries have not yet presented or expressed interest to present a VNR. In 2023, there will be 42 countries will present their VNRs. So this is inform the statisticians, and then what we can support the policy side to prepare the voluntary national review, and in the coming years. Next slide, please. And so I will focus on a little bit on the global SDG report, which fit into the high-level political forum and also the GA. So we produced this annual flagship report, the SDG development goals report. This report is available in all 6 official languages. And the progress will review all 17 goals and cover over like 100 indicators using the latest data. This report is mainly for general public, so we want to make it very concise and easy to understand. And we also, since 2019, we introduced the 18 pages infographics, summarize the key message of the 17 goals and leaving no one behind, which become very popular, particular for academia for education purpose, and it has been used a lot in the media as well. So this work is in collaboration with more than 300 to 400 experts from over 50 international agencies, because we have over 200 indicators, so just average 2 to 3 experts at least from each agency. So we have this like so many experts work behind this short, concise report. And it's built on 2.3 million data points from countries in the global SDG indicator database. So basically, this is a product, the global statistical community, and from country, the original data from country, and send it to the custodian agency. And so it's the output of the global statistical community on the assessment of the progress. Next slide, please. So in addition to the report, we also produce the SDG progress chart, which is a snapshot of global and regional progress of selected target under the 17 goals of the 2030 agenda. So in the last year, 2022 progress chart, clearly demonstrated that deterioration of progress towards many of the targets, such as poverty, food security, ending the epidemic of malaria, immunization coverage, and employment, caused by the impacts of the COVID pandemic, climate change, and the conflict. Next slide, please. Okay. So we also produced overall, later I will show the video, animated video, and also 1 minute, around 1 minute video for each individual goals. And this is also become popular to educate the people about SDG and the progress SDGs. Next slide, please. In addition to the report, because we want to aim to have a very concise report for the general public, but we also want to provide the rich information provided by the custodian agency, a lot of additional information and analysis, focus on detailed regional analysis and also different aspects. So we prepared this extended report. This is based on the story line input from the custodian agencies, and include additional context and data on all the SDG indicators. So if you go to our website for each goal, you can see very rich information and on all the indicators available. So this is a great resource to dive deeply on the SDG indicators. And we also provide additional resources from the custodian agency and the contact person from the custodian agencies. So in addition, we want to bring show the face and story behind the data, find it in the global figure on the SDG. So we produce this flip book on the Bring Data to Life, the SDG human impact story from across the globe. So this product captures 37 real life story across 24 countries of people who are struggling to get out of poverty, battling the effect of climate change in their daily life, and dealing with the impact of COVID and other challenges. And it's organized by the 17 goals. And so each story touch upon multiple aspects of the SDG agenda. So this story illustrates how intervention in one of some area can have a positive or negative impact on other areas across the goals. Yeah. I probably just want to show the video and to summarize the main finding from the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yongi. Well, congratulations, employees. Oh, I feel like I'm talking to my staff. Congratulations, everyone. I think the 22 report, as every SDG report, shows the hard work that this group has undertaken and the collaboration between the countries and the custodian agencies. On top of it, congratulations to UNSD. This is a huge amount of work, and this is no longer a single Sustainable Development Goals report. There's the extended report. There's the infographics. There's all the learning materials. So congratulations. It's an enormous amount of work, and the video is fantastic. We'll move on to our next item under this agenda item, and that is the progress on Sustainable Development Goals, the gender snapshot. And Sarah Dirto Valero from UN Women, if you could come up and present to us. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I have the pleasure to talk this morning about the Gender Snapshot 2022. I think most of you probably know already about the Gender Snapshot. This is a joint publication between UNSD and UN Women that is produced annually. And it's the only publication, the only global publication that looks at every one of the SDGs from a gender perspective. So word of warning that I personally wasn't involved directly in the production of this report. So if you ask me very complicated questions about the aggregates, maybe I need to go back to my colleagues, or maybe Yongi or some of the colleagues here in UNSD can respond. The publication, as I was saying, covers every one of the SDG reports, every one of the SDG goals. So in UN Women, we like to say that in order to achieve the SDGs, we really need to achieve gender equality and mainstream gender across every single one of the goals. Like, we cannot eliminate poverty if half of the world's population, which are women, remain poor, right? Or we cannot achieve universal education if women and girls, especially if girls remain out of school, and so on and so forth. But in order to see if we're doing well in achieving progress towards each of the goals, we actually need the gender statistics to look at how well or how poorly we're doing. And this is what this report tries to achieve. It looks at every one of the goals, and it looks at gender statistics for each of the goals. Next. Yeah. So I'm not going to go through every one of the goals here because that would take very long. So I'll just cover some of the first few goals and then share the link to the report for those of you who are interested in looking at it. So this is on the first goal on poverty. We have partnered with the World Bank to create sex-aggregated estimates on extreme poverty. And we know that as trends are going, by the end of this year, there's going to be 383 million women and girls that are facing extreme poverty. This is particularly worrisome in sub-Saharan Africa, where, according to current trends, the number of women in poverty by 2030 would be higher than the current amount. So obviously, this is something to worry about. And it doesn't really have to be this way. There's ways that we can put policies in place to kind of like reverse this trend. UN Women has been working now for a bit with the Pardee Center in the University of Denver to create kind of a forecast scenarios, future scenarios, to see how investing in certain policies or certain topics can have like multiplier effects on different outcomes. So for instance, we know that if we invest in a comprehensive package on education, family planning, equal wages, and we extend social transfers, we will be able to lift about 150 million women out of poverty by 2030. So there is still a chance. Next, please. On goal 2 on food security, we see that, for instance, the COVID-19 pandemic, the current conflicts, and the climate crisis are really worsening food security in some cases. So we see that the gender gap on food security in 2020 is 10% compared to 6% in 2019. So we see a bit of a worrisome trend there. This is particularly worrisome in Latin America and the Caribbean, and especially among households that are the poorest households and the least educated population groups. In conflict settings, as I was saying, this is even more of a challenge. We know that 37.5% of female-headed households compared to 20.5% of male-headed households are food insecure in war-affected areas. This is 2021 data. Next, please. For education, for instance, the analysis that you see here on the graph is really disaggregating by multiple levels. So we're looking at the richest urban households compared to the poorest rural households. And we see that obviously there's wide gaps in almost every context, but in some contexts, the gap is as large as 11.5 percentage points in places like Guatemala, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Turkmenistan, Myanmar. So this type of intersectional analysis obviously is very important, not just for the education goal, but really for all the other goals if we really want to leave no one behind. Next, please. Then finally, goal 5, as you all know, is the gender equality, specific goal. Again, we see that COVID-19 and other crises are having an impact on goal 5 and stalling progress and even reversing progress in some cases. So we know that besides the more visual effects of the pandemic, we have the shadow pandemic of violence against women. We have collected data through rapid assessment surveys. We have done big data analysis, and we have seen that violence trends are worsening inside the homes. But also looking at some of the SDG data that we have, we see that at the current rate, it will take 286 years to close legal gaps and remove discriminatory laws, 140 years to achieve equality on workforce leadership, 40 years to achieve equal representation in parliament. And if we really want to eliminate child marriage by 2030, we will have to speed up the process, by 17 times. So again, lots of work to do if we want to really achieve this goal by 2030. We also know that as a result of the pandemic, the unpaid care and domestic workloads have worsened dramatically for everybody, men and women. But only 60% of countries have established some sort of policy around childcare. So obviously this inaction is going to have some costs, particularly for women. Next, please. So as a result of this inaction, when we look at whether the SDGs are going to be achieved by 2030, we see that currently 28% of the SDG indicators are far from target. This is the SDG indicators for goal 5 specifically, are far from target. About 1/3 of the goal 5 indicators are moderate distance from target. About 1/4 are close to target, and only 12% are either met or almost met. But this is only from the indicators where we actually have data. We only have data for 47% of the SDG 5 indicators. So also a lot of work to do in terms of data production. And finally, just sharing the QR code for the report. If you want to explore the full report, you can just point at the QR code with your phone and you'll see it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So I think we can open this for any questions or comments on both the presentations, the one by Yonggi and the one by Sarah. So if you have any comments, please raise your flag. I can't see who it is. I see a flag up, but I can't see. Sen? Please go ahead.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Raymond Sanna from the Center for Socioeconomic Development. I'm speaking based on experience we made in Geneva for the UNECE. We had a side event on 5C1 and also in New York this year during the HLPF. I would like to ask you what could be done for 5C1? Everything you gave us as a background, how many years it will take to achieve the different targets, which of course is extremely worrisome. But as a start now, I think if we could help countries to at least do more about 5C1, it would help get faster to the targets. And 5C1, just to briefly mention, it's a proportion of countries with systems to track and make public allocations for gender equality and women's empowerment. Now, according to your study, which I've read, it says 4 regions are farthest away from achieving the target. 1 is medium, and 1 region doesn't even have data about it. So if our governments don't make available financial allocation to achieve the targets, I think it looks like we're never going to get much further than we are today. So I'd like to know from the UN Women's Group in general, what are your plans to help our countries move forward when it comes to 5C1? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to give you a response, but I can also go back to my colleagues that monitor this indicator in particular. I'm sure they have some additional suggestions. I think from a lot of the work we do, if we want to really create change, I think the impetus needs to come from inside the countries, right? So, including gender-related strategies within national development strategies is very important. And for that, besides working with advocates, like women's machineries within the countries, which obviously can make a very important, can play a very important role in promoting this. It's also very important to work with ministries of planning, for instance, to make sure that sufficient funds are allocated to gender equality. So here's where data actually can play a very important role, right? If we have data on what are some of the gender gaps and data that are official statistics and recognized by the government, then it's easier for us to advocate and to work with women's machineries within countries so they advocate. So then this gender priorities are included within national strategies. So that's obviously one step towards increasing financial allocations. I also wanted to flag that we do a lot of statistical capacity building in countries, and we often find that actually countries may not submit data to UN Women on this indicator, but they actually obviously have the information internally. So I think part of the work is also, around building the statistical capacity of countries to report on this particular indicator, which is not your typical statistical indicator. And therefore, maybe the reporting lines are a little bit different. So maybe kind of like that two-pronged approach is what I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any more questions or comments from colleagues? India, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Could you throw some light on the disaggregated data for this SDG 5 indicator? Because 47% of the indicators are having data, but what about the disaggregated data that is for all components of any indicator? Can you throw some light on?
Sorry, so just to make sure I understand your question, you would like to know how much gender data we have across the framework beyond SDG 5, correct?
What for each indicator, there may be some components of each indicator. So data may be available for certain component for 47% of the indicator. Whether this is the situation for all components or
I think I could give you a response, but let me actually check and come back to you after the break just to make sure how that 47% is exactly calculated, because I don't want to give you the wrong information. I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? I don't see anything. Okay, thank you very much, Sarah and Yongi. We will move on to item 3, update of the work of the high-level group on partnership, coordination, and capacity building for statistics for the 2030 agenda. And Elsa Dooley from Albania and the HLG PCCB co-chair will present for us.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues. In fact, as a co-chair of the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building, I will present to you in the summary the work that is done by this group of the meeting during the 22nd. The focus of HLG group for partnership coordination and capacity building works, in fact, over these years has included three main topics. The update of work done for the preparation of the UN World Data Forum, which will be held on Hangzhou on 2023, and that will be more detailed about the work that the program committee has done for preparing the next UN World Data Forum in the next topic of the agenda. The second has been the plans for the revision of the Cape Town Global Action Plan. And the third, it has been the information about the main instruments for funding and implementing the Cape Town Global Action Plan, which was launched in the Bern on the last UN World Data Forum organized in the Bern. Let's start from the city gap, which in its resolution approved the 6 strategic area where the work for the developing the data and statistics will be focused on, in 14 objectives, and identify the 66 key actions. Continue after that with the Dubai Declaration, organized in 2018, where it was a call for finding the instruments for innovative funding mechanism to support the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan. But during the years, the changes were done, and the pandemic was in our doors, and the National Statistical Office should be react through the statement presented on 53rd UN Statistical Commission. The position of official statistics and the National Statistics Office, how they reacted during the COVID-19, were presented based on the results that on 2 surveys were organized during this period. But it was really necessary to emphasize the role and the main instruments for funding the implementation of the Cape Town Global Action Plan. Continue it with a Bern UN World Data Forum, where a position of official statistics and National Statistical Office in the wider data ecosystem was presented and approved. Next slide, please. But what were the operationalizations actions for the implementation of the city gap? On 2021, a survey were organized to assess the situation about the actions to be implemented for the implementation of the Global Action Plan. The Bern Network launched the main instruments for the implementation those actions, such as the clearinghouse for financing and developing data, and through the global data facility, where the surveys on the implementation of the city gaps were organized. Based on the results of the 2021 survey, where the situation, where we were on those action plan, was prepared a statement presented in the UN Statistical Commission in its 53rd meeting. The other elements, the survey and the results of the surveys were analyzed in collaboration with the Paris 21 and the World Bank, where the both instruments together identify, such as the clearinghouse for financing and development data and the complex risk analytics funds, were developed to initiate and to push over the implementation of those actions. Thank you. The shaping for the next UN World Data Forum outcome documents, in fact, it's it has a plan about the 2 years. For revision of the action plan, in the high-level group, it was proposed to create a subgroup in which this subgroup will work for about 2 years to analyze all the elements and the initiatives that should be taken for revision in the simple outart global action plan. In this context, in the slides, you are looking and you are seeing the plan for preparing the outcome documents to be presented in the next UN World Data Forum. The HLG work, in fact, has planned that. As I mentioned, in first quarter 2021, surveys were organized for assessing the situation, and continue with a complete review in the second quarter of the 2022, continue with in the fourth quarter of 2022, we'll propose a new framework about the action that should be taken for the revision of the Global Action Plan. On the next meeting of the UN Statistical Commission in its 54 meeting, we'll review the action, which will be launched in the next UN World Data Forum, which will be held in Hangzhou of China. In the fourth quarter of the next year, proposed in the new Global Action Plan will become presented, and it will be reviewed on the first quarter of the 2024 year, which will be opened for the public consultation on 2024 third quarter and will launch on fourth quarter of 2024. Next slide, please. What are the main principles that we, as a member of the HLG group, agreed? The main focus was to build on existing structure, not to have so many differences on the structure of the 6 strategic area identified. And basis on this, basis on this, we'll continue to simply identify the most action that are relevant for the time being that we are facing now. Next slide, please. We need to adapt with the new context of the situation that it's created around the world. As we know, the COVID-19 passed, and we needed to change our behavior regarding the COVID-19 in direction of providing data and statistics. Now the economic crisis is in place, the conflict war is in place, the climate change is let's say changing continuously, the energy situation and the food insecurity around the world. It's a phenomena which are all of those are the big challenges facing today now around the world. But there are a lot of opportunities how to face with those challenges. And we need to make the cases for more evidence. We need to present them and to discuss how we can integrate the different sources to provide and to produce more data and more statistics by having in place the innovative systems to push forward and to simplify the way on the implementation, not only the funding instruments such as the clearinghouse or the FDA's funds, but we have to work more on the way just to facilitate all the providers of the data and to ensure the community, the global community, about the data and statistics, the new data and statistics that we need to face with all the challenges that are facing now around the world. Next slide, please. And in fact, the current recommendations that we as a member of that HLG group are that to keep the name, not to have changes in its name, a Cape Town Global Action Plan, to keep the scope on the 6 strategic areas, but simplify the framework, move more in the basic statistical activities within the strategic area. Second, on innovation and modernization of the way how to implement them. To develop a single list of priority areas based on the existing objectives and key action structure, bring in the more of the current context. The next one, please. And those were the focus of the HLG working group for partnership, coordination, and capacity building during the 22nd. In fact, our work will not stop here at the end of 22nd, as we have a lot of action to discuss in our group. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Elsa. I'll open the floor for any questions or comments while we have Elsa at the podium. I see none. So thank you, Elsa. I think the work that the group is doing is really important as we move forward. So now we'll have the update on the UN World Data Forum 2023, which is also part of the work of the HLG, and Francesca Parucci will update us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So updates on the UN World Data Forum. Many of you are familiar with the process. As we always say, the UN Data Forum is not an event, it's a process. We have a very large community that has joined gradually since we started in Cape Town in 2017 and grew to be over 10,000 people. I think we had about 13,000 when we opened the platform for the virtual forum in 2020. And that community is very active. We have regular webinars covering the topics of under each of the thematic areas of the forum. We have regular exchange with this community, and it's a very diverse group of data actors coming from national governments, official statistical systems, private sector, academia, a lot of civil society. So it's a very active, dynamic group, large group of data actors. So where are we with preparations for the data forum that is scheduled to be held in China in April 2023? The co-chair of the high-level group has already touched upon some of the main areas of work that feed into the preparations for the forum, including the revision of the Cape Town Global Action Plan, among others. But I'll focus a little bit to give you an update of where we stand with the actual preparation of the program of the forum and some of the logistic aspects. So if you look at the first slide, you see the 4 thematic areas. Many of you might remember that for the first few years since we started in Cape Town, we used to have 6 thematic areas. But then the program committee undertook a review of the content under each of the areas and decided to sort of streamline a little bit the content and came up with this new formulation of 4 thematic areas. The reason why we did this is also to reflect the progress that had been made by this broader community of data actors. And you see that reflected in mainly when you look at thematic area 1, now you have the whole area of innovation and what used to be thematic area 3 on leaving no one behind that be merged, reflecting and considering the fact that all the work that has been done to innovate, improve data sources, improve the way we integrate different data sources was done to fill the data gaps, but at the same time to really fulfill the principle of creating inclusive data system and having data that really reflect the reality of all citizens, all people in the whole population. So it's hard to disentangle the two. Efforts are just one area of work, with the result of both innovating and addressing those new data needs. So that's where thematic area 1 comes. And then thematic area 2 is maximizing the use and value of data for better decision making, which is similar to what we used to have on the use of data. It is now more focused on maximizing the value of data, and many of you might be familiar with the whole process around the data value project that was launched by the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and other partners. So there's a huge sort of work stream around that. So that's where thematic area 2 comes. Then thematic area 3 is building trust and ethics in data. I don't need to explain to you what that is. I think everybody in this room is very heavily engaged with improving trust in data, issues of governance, issues of data stewardship, etc. And thematic area 4 is what used to be in the original formulation of the thematic areas, both thematic area 1 and 6. So thematic area 1 was on capacity building and 6 was on sort of the way forward. Those two have been merged. So now we talk about emerging trends and partnerships to develop the data ecosystem. So we look at both what's been done and what needs to be done, the main gaps, the remaining gaps to improve data at the same time, and that's thematic area 4. So if we look at the next slide, this is how we have organized the program. As in the past, we have a plenary session, what we call high-level plenary session per thematic area. So there will be 4 plenary sessions related to the 4 thematic areas. We'll also have an opening day organized by the host country, and of course a closing plenary organized by the host country and the Secretariat. On top of the main 4 thematic areas, sort of plenary sessions, we also have 1 plenary that is organized by the host country, the Chinese NBS, the National Statistical Office of China, with support from the program committee, and that will be covering topics of their choice. And what we've seen so far, they will cover the issue of beyond GDP and other elements with that thematic area, with that plenary session. And then we have a new topic, a new plenary session that will be entirely organized by the program committee, and that's really meant to showcase the program committee, what the program committee represents. The program committee is a group of partners representing all the different data communities, all the different data actors, civil society, academia. We have data journalists, private sector representatives, national statistical offices, etc. So that's really to show, what the program committee represents and to show the journey that's been made since Cape Town. And it's also a way to sort of recognize the important role they play and all the work they do. They do an enormous amount of work to organize the forum. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to show a little bit how we put together the process. Again, many of you are familiar because we have a lot of proposals from you. So I'm sure you're part of those numbers somehow. So as in the past, we had a call for proposals. We had the first sort of review done by us, by the Secretariat, to sort of clean, for missing information or wrong submissions for whatever reason. And that was done in June. We had an initial number of 399 proposals that went down to 328, and then we had a first round of review by the program committee that brought down the number to 296. And then we did another review internally and proposed to some of the proposers, the organizers, to merge so that we could accommodate as much as possible of the content that had been offered, because I must say, this time in particular, all proposals were really very high quality, very well thought through, very well developed. So that went down with all the mergings, etc. The number went down to 177. We passed it again to the program committee and to the high-level group for partnership coordination and capacity building, as we heard earlier from the co-chair El Saduli. In September, they did a final review, and we now have this final number of 104 sessions proposed. That will constitute the program of the forum to be then finally launched in December 22 this year, at the end of the year, when we will hear about the final decision from the host country on what the logistics situation is going to be in the country. If we go to the next slide, just to give you a little bit of a sense of how these proposals are distributed across the 4 thematic areas, it's as you see, the larger 2 areas are thematic area 1 and 2, and we have a little bit smaller set of proposals for thematic area 3 and 4. And if you go to the next slide, you see a little bit of the keywords. What are the main topics covered? Of course, there's a lot of overlap across the 4 thematic areas. Some of the recurrent themes and keywords, you know, data protection, trust, decision-making, when we talk about data use, statistical standards, partnership, inclusion. Inclusive data inclusion is a recurrent theme, of course, coming from different angles, both from the data production, from the data use, the whole data value chain. And we look at, of course, the issues gender, data equity, data science, etc. And if you look at the next slide, this is a little bit how the speakers are distributed across data communities and across regional representation. So you can see that there is, of course, there's a lot of don't know, those who are not classified, but among those who are classified, we have all the communities, the different data groups that I mentioned earlier, international agencies, private sector, academia, etc. But we do have some that are less represented as proposers, as organizers, but of course, like for instance, you see 0 when it comes to geospatial, because we had no proposals sent in by a geospatial organization, but we have geospatial data integration covered in many, many sessions. So it's a bit strange that we don't have those as original sort of organizers. But we have a lot of academia, we have private sector, although not as represented as one would want. And of course, the highest number of proposals is from government, meaning a lot of national statistical offices, of course, but also other parts of the government. And then the regional distribution, we have regions that are sometimes less represented, and we always struggle to ensure good overall representation among speakers. And this is what you see now, but what we are working on is also going back to the organizers to ensure good regional balance. So asking them, you know, to integrate more speakers. If, for instance, there are across the whole group, you know, there are not sufficient representation of national statistical systems, we ask them to include them, or if there is not sufficient representation of private sector, etc., we do ask for some adjustments so that we ensure a good balance, a good representation, and also good gender balance. All male panels are prohibited, and we got a lot of criticism actually in one of the first, I forget if it was, I think the second forum in Dubai, where we sort of somehow lost control of some of the sessions that were reorganized at the last moment, and we ended up with panels where there was no gender balance, which really reflected really bad on the organizers. So we're paying particular attention to that, and also good representation of all different data groups from civil society including. And then if we go to the next slide, I just want to tell you a little bit about what the next steps are. I know there are a lot of questions. I'm very often approached by colleagues asking me, is the forum really going to happen next year? Because of course we all know that the host country, China, is still facing some heavy restrictions in terms of being able to gather in large groups and offering, this space to gather with large groups of people. because of the still, being careful with the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So they are still imposing some restrictions. So the final decision on that will be made in December. So by December, depending on what the situation is in the host country, we will know whether we go ahead with at least part of the forum being in person. We are working, of course, on a web platform similarly to what we use for the virtual forum in 2020 and for what we used in Bern, Switzerland last year when the forum was hybrid. So for sure, at the minimum, the forum will be a hybrid event, but we don't know what that in-person component will look like, let's put it that way. So the next deadline is for the 20th of November to submit all the details, final details of the proposals, reconfirming titles and providing better description of the speakers, etc. The final program, as I said earlier, will be released in December, 13th of December, and that's the moment when the final decision, we'll have the final decision on the logistic aspects and we'll open up the registration process. In January 2022, we will ask organizers to submit their final confirmation of all details, bios, photos, you name it, everything we need to put up on the platform for people to see. And then March 23 we'll come back and ask organizer to submit all the actual presentations and all other media. And then finally, we all hope Monday, 24th of April, 2023 will be the first day opening ceremony of the forum, and then the next 3 days will be the actual conference, the actual forum. So meanwhile, we're also working very hard to still keep the community active. We'll do similar to what we did in the past, a call for data stories, a call for inputs, and we'll have also local meetups in various parts of the world, and colleagues at UNDP will also help with that, creating these additional spaces for smaller NGOs who can't travel or people who might not necessarily have good internet connection in some of the smaller towns in some countries. So they cannot even connect to the hybrid platform, to the virtual platform. So that is very important to us. The forum is really about capturing everything and not just having those who have better access, those who know how to do it, how to submit proposals, right, to come to the forum, but also capturing those who have less access. But still, they do very good work, especially when it comes to citizen data or other additional and new data sources. They still do very meaningful work, and they're not they don't have visibility and they cannot exchange their experiences. So we're trying to capture that additional sort of layer. So that's a bit in a nutshell, the work being done and the spirit of the forum. Thank you so much. And of course, happy to answer questions. Over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Francesca. So I'll open the floor to any questions to Francesca about the next World Data Forum. Okay, I see no flags raised. So, well, we have one more item. Update on the revamped SDG Global Data Indicator Database website. Daniel Eshti from UNSD.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My is not a presentation, but it's just a live demonstration of our SDG Global Database. Yongi was going through the publication, our flagship publication, but that all fed through our database. It is also a contribution from all the custodian agencies sitting here who are providing data. So last year we did a revamp of the whole platform. The change kind of integrated 3 different components into the application, where we had separate application now are being put together as an SDG platform from our section. So if you see here on the website, We have like 4 tabs here. Those are the 4 things that we integrated into one. They used to be separate applications. That's a huge integration work. The first one, definitely that has been the key is like the database. So everybody comes here to look into getting access to the global data sets that are published. We have a quarterly release of the data. The one just before the publication for SDGs, there is a final update before it goes out for the publication, but we do it from used to be once a year, but now it's 4 times a year. And then we've added a couple of things that are useful for the users, but not noticeable. As first you go into the database, there was some questions that we received from users after the first launch was done in September 2022. And then we did a revision and updates and a release in March 2022. So you will see like the database is really for a typical user, it's a bit difficult because there are like 231 unique indicators. We have about more than 600 data series that you will have on your face. So you have to know how to go and how to navigate. And a lot of people were asking, how do we kind of save our queries? So somebody is interested on SDG 211 and they always come to that database, that part of the data that they wanted to monitor time series. And we introduced a provision of saving your query so you can retrieve it later on. So all these things now here, it brings all the things under goal 2. I just clicked goal 2 and then it gives me all the indicators on goal 2, but I might not be interested in all of them. So I have to do usually, okay, I don't need this, I don't need that. So I have to limit my search, right? And then I say show. So it's giving me all these series of indicators. So next time I come to this database, if I have to do the same thing, I have to do it from scratch. So to avoid that, we created a save query option where you can save your query. So next time you come, you don't have to redo the same thing. So you can, I'm just going to save my query here just to do a quick demonstration. I call it, okay, this was my goal to search. So I need to check it maybe after a month or something. So it's added here. So it's in my profile. So next time I come, I go back to say the overview page and then, so I go again to the database. Then it gives me the same option of picking it from the list. So we're using Wi-Fi, so it might, so here, okay. But let me just click on one and then show result. Now I'm back to the same interface, but I don't want to kind of go ahead, select, deselect things. So I can go and then retrieve my query. So here, okay. So it asks me to my email. So I will load my queries. So you see there's a list of things that I have. I've done a couple of them, and then you can view, or you can also send it to your colleagues. So, this is the data I'm looking at. So if you want to look at the same screen, the same data points I'm looking, so you can share it. So you can send an email. So this is one improvement. I just do a couple of them to show you on the user interface of the data part of things. The second big component we've added is the analytics part, which is a lot of questions that users provide to know, data availability of a specific indicator or a specific goal across all the indicators. So we have the marking point 2015 is our, that's where SDGs started. So if I want to check data across indicators across all countries, all goals, I can just do a quick show and it produces a chart which has some kind of traffic light. It's loading that. So you see here, these are all the goals here, and then you see the greener is where we have more data, which is classified as more than 75% of data sets are available in this. So on the snapshot on this, you can see goal 3 and goal 17 have a lot of green compared to goal 1. So the more the rate, goal 16, we're lacking a lot of data there. So that gives you an idea. So if this is across the globe, but if you want to kind of change to a specific country, you can also come here and pick a specific country. So if I want to know it's like what's happening in Algeria across all goals, I could do the same thing. This time I will see only for Algeria. So you see it's more greener here. Oh, more greener here than the global one. So when you zoom down to a specific country. So the same option is there to save our queries. This is a new thing we added. So it will help you to come back to what you're looking for. So the other thing is you can also do additional analytics in kind of looking through trends. So we have global and regional trends you can look through. So we have this Secretary General's Annex table. It's a big publication where it lists a lot of analysis. So let me just pick one, maybe goal 1.1, the one from ILO. And then it just gives me a breakdown of tables, statistical tables of this indicator. So you'll see how it looks. This is a big one, so that's why it's taking a little bit more time. So you see, so yeah, we have a lot of breakdown in this ILO code. So 15 plus POSIX, 15 plus female, and then you see a time series data set. These are multiple tables. These are statistical tables that you can use in our report. This is something that we have in our statistical annex. We never had a chance to create this before. So this is one big, huge improvement in the database. And users can produce their regional, statistical tables on specific indicator. This is more tabular. We have also an option to look into an analytical trends on specific indicators using graphs. So let me pick again one series. So this is national poverty data set. This one is a little bit complicated because we cannot select everything. So we pick a specific indicator and it will allow me to select up to 5 countries. So I can, and then when you look into the drop downs here, it will only highlight the ones we have data for. So you can clearly see not every country has data, but it gives you an idea. So let me just see this one. So this will produce a type of line chart where you can see progress across on this specific indicator by country. So you could see how the trend is going. Ecuador, I don't know what's happening. You see the trend was supposed to go down, it's going up. So that's a clear sign of deterioration. But you see the rates are kind of going down slowly. And then you could also look into some data points and shifts. For instance, Albania, you can see it was going down until 2008, and then it picked up after 2008. Maybe this is indication to the recession we had in 2008, 2009. It ticked up, went up, and then coming back a little bit down. So these kind of analytical things are already introduced. So you can download the data, specific data for this indicator, or you can also embed it in a web application. There's a way to embed it. If somebody who's savvy enough to create their own stories, they can take this code and put it in their website. So it will show up there. The third component I wanted to show is on the part of the metadata. I mean, this custodian agency group here have been contributing a lot on metadata. So we have officially created an SDMX endpoint for metadata, which is new. I think even in the SDMX group. So the SDGs have been pioneer in putting this up. So this one gives you a breakdown of the metadata, a specific series or indicator. So I can select, let me take one. No, this is multidimensional poverty. You will see we have 7 concepts on the metadata. All of them can be viewed here. So this will detail the list of the metadata components. So it's coming from an API. Anybody can pull this data. It also helps into the work of the World Bank. We're working with in translation project of the metadata into different languages. So it's a little bit heavier on pulling this data set. So let's see. So a form will pop up. So it's taking some time in this one. Yeah. So yeah, I'm running out of time, but I would invite you to go through this website. There's a lot of improvement that we put together, and any questions, welcome. So I'll stop it here, but please feel free to go to the website, try to play around. If you have any feedback and comments, you're welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a very interactive website. So we'll open the floor for questions on this and or any other questions. So this will be questions on 5 and any other questions from this that you might have for any of the things presented this morning. So I'll open the floor. Uganda?
Yes, thank you very much. My question or comment is on when you look at a section of the responsibility centers where we have the custodian UN agencies responsible for particular indicators. So my question is the mode of accountability you pose to these responsible UN agencies, because we have so many indicators that have continued to have no data at country level, at national level. And so I just wanted to understand or appreciate how accountable are these UN agencies, especially when it comes to your office in supporting countries in developing statistics for these indicators. Because as you know, that most countries, we're still grappling with the data points, non-availability of data for most of the indicators. Yet we have these custodian UN agencies present and doing business in these countries, and we continue to grapple with lack of data. So I just wanted to understand the linkage and how you hold them accountable. Thank you.
India, then Palestine.
Thank you. Is there any option in the database to identify whether it is national data or model data? Thank you.
Good morning for all. About the source of data, there is national data and estimated data. Related to the estimated data, sometimes when we upload the data, we are seeking for the methodology. So it's not clear maybe, so we need to be more clear about the methodology of these estimated data. Thank you.
I think maybe we'll respond to the 3 questions that we have, and then we'll take one more round.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start with Uganda. So the question on responsibilities of the custodian agencies and and us versus UNSD. So we are at the UNSD have the global database that should come from custodian agencies, but the responsibility of consulting within countries falls under the custodian agency. So this is data set that comes to the global database for international comparability reasons. And there would definitely be some differences and similarities, but that is usually explained through the metadata. So that's why we have a big component on the metadata. So you could see how the methodology, what the source, who is the contact person, everything is detailed on the metadata. So most of it is explained in the metadata, and some could be some methodological differences that could also be followed up with custodian agencies. We, UNSD, do not follow up with countries in a specific data set unless we are custodian for it. So we have few indicators we're responsible for that we report, but most of the data set is coming from custodian agencies. So we have all of them here. They can also kind of voice if that is something that they want to share. But custodian agencies have a responsibility to follow up with country and submit the data set for our global collection. I think it's a little bit similar between India and Palestine. The question on also so this also is addressed through metadata. All the data set we have is also associated with metadata. So you would know the type of, the nature of the data is also classified in the data also. And then if you need more, you can also look into the metadata where you get a very detailed methodological differences. And then we have flags that identify which is which, whether it's model, whether it's country adjusted, whether it's really raw country data. So all those are on each observation point. We have 2.3 million records. All of them are tagged with a specific resource with the metadata. But that's as far as I know.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we had the Danish Institute for Human Rights had a question.
It's not a question, it's just to congratulate the efforts of this website. I was just browsing around it, and it's an incredible effort to improve the accessibility and the availability of data for all the users. So just wanted to not let this go unnoticed, and congratulate you and thank you for the efforts for putting this up. Thank you.
Okay, Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, Sabina.
Thank you so much. Again, congratulations. This is a great initiative. I just wanted to ask about standard errors or confidence intervals. They had been in the earlier version and they're not in this. They do exist in a number of countries. So I had a question about that. And relatedly, because you asked for any other questions, for a national indicator like 1.2.2 multidimensional poverty, which cannot be compared, it's therefore missing from also the SDG Goal 1 report. And the network of countries have put forward some suggestions of wording of how to include national indicators that cannot be aggregated. But any remarks or suggestions on how to take that forward are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. FAO?
Just a small comment saying that, yes, first of all, to recognize that there was a big improvement in the user friendliness of the database and the website. It's much more accessible, but also an information for countries to say that international agencies are still working to harmonize a bit the flag system, the way in which data are designed, like model data or country adjusted data. This terminology is not used consistently across agency, and this may create some misunderstanding with countries in terms of where these data come from. And so work is being done, and we hope to reach a consensus soon on a more harmonized way to define the data that are included in the global database.
Thank you, Pietro. I see no other questions, so oh, OHCHR.
Yeah, thank you. From UN Human Rights, I just want to say as well, congratulations on this database, very useful. We use it a lot for our fundraising activities as well to help us increase data availability for the indicators that are under our custodianship. So I wanted to ask, would it be possible to have the data, for example, availability by custodian agency? So I think I've seen some data, but it was not from this database. And for example, data on the capacity building, but also resources that has been received by custodian agencies to produce data for the SDG indicators. Thank you.
So if you'd like to respond.
Just start from the last question. We also have like custom kind of reports that is always produced on demand. We haven't put this on the custodian agencies on the website. That's so that needs a bit of clarification. So it's not something that we do on the fly because reporting comes in different stages, and there are data sets which are still being processed but not published, waiting for a custodian agency kind of green line for some. So it would not be an exact kind of figure to show it publicly, but we do custom kind of reports on request basis with custodian agencies. And as FAO also interjected, there is also a follow-up mechanism with the custodian agencies on data submission, reporting. So all those things are happening behind the scene, but we don't put them up on the website. Those are like internal processes that we strive to kind of contain because it's very technical and it's showing it on the website would not give you the right picture. So that's the reason. For the Oxford question on the national poverty line, World Bank might be the right people to answer this, or I'll ask my colleagues if they can, but I really don't have any answer on that.
Maybe I'll try to address the confidence interview. I think we do include it in the before the midpoint, the lower, and I will maybe go back to check our colleague in the development data team to see if they still keep it or the reason to remove it. I think we should have. We had this data series and probably should keep it, but I'll double check and get back to you on that question. On the national indicators, so I think we will work together with the World Bank, UNDP, and UNICEF to collect the data on the national multidimensional poverty indicators for the global reporting because we have some limitation on that. We want to keep the report concise and also try not to focus on individual countries' information. So that's why we haven't included the national multidimensional poverty line in the global report. But we maybe try to find a way to work with the custodian agency, try to see how we can promote this reporting on this national multidimensional poverty line. But this need to work together with the three custodian agency for this 1, 2 indicators. And also just want to mention the data is updated quarterly. So at end each quarter, there's some new data coming. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've reached the time where we'll have our break. So 15 minutes, so 10:51. And so we'll see you back here then.
Ethel, request to speak.
Hi, everybody. We'll get started again. We have a couple of housekeeping items. So we have some countries that weren't able to attend. So we have some custodian agencies at the back. If you could move up, we could fill in and then I could maybe see because I can't see the people at the very back. So if you see an open space where there's several countries that weren't able to attend, so you can move up. Another housekeeping item is that the list of participants is on the website. So if you're wondering who's participating in the meeting, you'll be able to find that there. And all the presentations will be uploaded to the website tomorrow. So with that, we will get started. We are on item 7 for discussion. It's the update of the working groups for the IAEG-SDG. And our first update is on the SDMX working group. So Daniel Eshti, on behalf of the SDG co-chairs, will lead us through this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll be giving a brief presentation on the working group of SDMX for SDGs. As you know, the IAGs have 3 working groups. So one of them is the SDMX SDGs working group. The current co-chair is Mexico, so I'm presenting on behalf of Mexico and the group. I'm also part of the member of the group. So the progress, we'll start a quick on what happened in 2022 so far. The first task we had was the work on the DSD for SDGs and for data and metadata. So the data one was released in 2019, but subsequently have been updated. We have the version 1.10, which is like the 10th release now. The metadata structure definition is new that came. That's another work we have. The second part is the establishment and maintenance of production metadata and data exchange. We have been working with some member states, custodian agencies to do this. We've already established an API endpoint, as presented earlier, for the SDGs global database. So the data, the metadata we have there for the global one is published there, and we also have an option for countries who are interested to participate to also do the data and metadata exchange. So far, we have 36 countries who've participated in this process and 6 custodian agencies for sharing their data in SDMX. We would like to continue the work on this and encouraging countries to collaborate on this engagement. We have been doing outreach with custodian agencies. This is important because we're receiving data from custodian agencies every year, and we are trying to automate as much as possible, and SDMX help us tremendously in that. So you don't have to do a lot of validations once you have a data in SDMX that's validated. So a lot of the pre-processing work can be handled by the standard itself. There is also a work with custodian agencies on training related to SDMX. So we've been doing that. Capacity building specific to countries have been also organized during the past year. Usually we work with regional commissions to cover a group of countries instead of doing one-to-one country trainings. We do that for specific projects with UNSD, but normally we go through regional organizations so we can have a most outcome out of this. So we've done trainings in the African region and Asian region. You see it was in UNESCO, UNECA for a number of countries. The other thing we do is we have a standing website. We maintain information on this website. So the working group is active in producing guidelines, some data flows, and the standard itself, and some how-tos for countries who want to get started with SDMX, or those who have been already using it but look into the changes and the updates. There's another chunk of work that is working on translations. Our DSD is in English, but we're trying to see if we can incorporate the DSD translation. This is a work that we're working with the World Bank and Stats Canada, Rostat, the Russian Statistics Office, also helping out in this regard. They are also part of the working group at some point, so they're helping out in getting this out as much as possible. We're also using the regional commissions. In ECLAC has been playing a role in promoting this to get the Spanish version of this released. The big implementation is coming out because SDMX has been in version 2.1 for quite some time. There is a new version that is released this year, which is 3.0. A lot of improvement have been made. The working group is also exploring ways of integrating this into SDMX 3.0 and the advantage we have. There are a lot of changes on annotation, the way we kind of handle message and things like that. So that's something that we need to work on, and there are a lot of new tools that's been coming on board, so we have to work on customizing that. So what is the work priorities continuing in 2023 for the working group? The maintenance is an ongoing process with the DSD, both for data and metadata. We also continue the work on SDMX exchange for data and metadata with selected countries. So we wanted to improve that and increase as much as possible. There is also a way we can address some issues that arise from the use of the standard itself. So there are different countries are at different level, and there are different queries that are coming. We're trying to sort that out as demand comes in. We are also working on this annotation. There's a big work on the standard in using annotation to optimize the DSD, because for the SDGs we have one big DSD which is catering for all the 231 indicators. So it's large, so we have to figure out ways to optimize it so that the transfer of large data sets would not impact the system. So there's a way to do it in annotation. That's something that we're exploring in 2023. We have been doing this capacity development work, not only UNSD, but member states are also doing that, and regional commissions and custodian agencies are also part of these capacity building activities. And we are trying to create e-learning materials out of this for the SDGs in particular. So we've almost finalized the e-learning for the DSD for SDGs, which is going to be released by the end of this month, I believe. We're on beta release. So maintenance of the web page with adding additional resources. So far, that would be something that would be ongoing, and the work on translation of the metadata itself also is an ongoing activity with the World Bank. This work has been ongoing last year too. The last item on the list is to explore the possibilities of using SDMX 3.0 for our DSD. Last but not least, just to give you a highlight what's coming for the working group, there is an experts group meeting for SDMX in general. So there is a sideline event associated with that for the working group. This would be an opportunity for members of the working group to explore the new possibilities on SDMX 3.0. And there will be a process of also approving our terms of reference with the working group. Once that is approved, it will be presented to the IAEG-SDGs group, and the member groups here in EC and in this room will be approving our terms of reference for the next year. So that's a quick update from the SDMX working group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll open the floor to questions or comments to Daniel on the work of the SDMX group. Okay, I see none. So the next update will be on Geospatial Information Working Group, and Mary Smith McCarthy, on behalf of the WGGI co-chair, will present to us.
Hello, everyone. This presentation is on the working group on geospatial information. And I'm presenting this on behalf of Kevin McCormick in the Central Statistics Office in Ireland. And Kevin is an IAEG-SDG member, and he's also co-chair of the working group on geospatial information. And just I'd like to say thanks to Mark Ilf of the UN for preparing this presentation. So looking at implementing Statistical Commission Decision 53-101, so the SDG Geospatial Roadmap was adopted. And in terms of Agenda 2030, the transformational vision and new data requirements have been challenging, and this has been amplified by the geospatial divide, digital divide. So in terms of leadership, knowledge, and innovation, primarily limited to some countries, the majority being the developed countries. So we can see that there is quite a big geospatial digital divide. While technologies are developing at a rapid pace, the skills and opportunities in developing countries are not, and some countries are being left behind. The SDG Geospatial Roadmap has been developed to provide simple guidance by the IAEG-SDGs, member states and custodian agencies to bridge this gap. So the Geospatial Roadmap is a living resource, and this will help communicate and enhance awareness of geospatial information. It will provide tools and methods to inform and support the implementation, monitoring and measuring of SDGs, and this will be tailored towards the national requirements. It will achieve this in 3 phases that details how and why geospatial information is needed and how it can be applied to support countries in their national requirements in providing SDG data. So in terms of promoting the SDG Geospatial Roadmap, there have been quite a number of initiatives undertaken. So Kyrgyzstan put the roadmap into action to produce SDG 911, and this looks at the proportion of the population that has access to an all-surface road. And I think it's within 2 kilometers of an all-surface road. SDG 1131 looks at the ratio of population growth to land consumption. And Burundi have implemented the SDGs Geospatial Roadmap to produce, measure and monitor SDG 15.4.2 in terms of Mountain Green Cover Index. And the roadmap has been presented and promoted at a number of events, including the IAEG in 2022 in Poland and various side events at the Statistical Commission and the UN Global Geospatial Information Management Conference. To look at a review of the work plan by the working group for this past year, 2022, Item 1 looked at promoting the SDG Geospatial Roadmap, and this was among custodian agencies and member states. Item number 2 looked at support the IAEG-SDG with further guidance and disaggregation by geographic location. Case studies were presented for countries and how they validated outputs of Earth observation and incorporated these into the outputs for their national SDG ecosystem. So various outputs from Earth observations and satellite data was used and to produce measurement and monitoring of the SDGs. Item 4 looked at promoting the awareness and implementation of the list of indicators and also the assessment matrix. Tools such as story maps and other interactive tools were used to present and communicate the work of the working group on geospatial information. Item 5 looked at communication and outreach. So again, story maps were important here and other material from members to strengthen and communicate the potential of geospatial information in terms of the SDGs. And item 6 looked at liaising with IAEG-SDGs and responding to requests by the group. In terms of leadership of the working group on geospatial information, Mexico has rotated out, so Ms. Paloma Merodio is leaving the group and Colombia are rotating in as co-chair of the working group, and Ms. Sandra Moreno will be joining the group. So in terms of promoting the SDG geospatial roadmap, at the previous meeting of the IAEG-SDGs, and the adoption of the SDG Geospatial Roadmap by UNSC Decision 53-101. The work has been promoted at various events and fora. So the IAOS in Poland in April, the Conference of European Statisticians and the UN Global Geospatial Information Management Group, and also various side events. So looking at the other items on the working group for the year, we had collating the use of case studies, how countries validated outputs from Earth observations and incorporated these outputs into their national SDG ecosystem. Item 4 was promoting the awareness and implementation of the list of indicators, and also we had assessment matrix and communication and outreach. So 10 members of the working group on geospatial information are using geospatial information to produce, measure and monitor the geospatially enabled SDGs. So this is done through the SDG assessment matrix, and it includes collating numerous examples of innovative methodologies. If we look ahead to the proposed working plan for next year by the working group on geospatial information, in terms of promoting the work, a timeline of March 2023 is set to convene a side event at the Statistical Commission to promote the SDG Geospatial Roadmap and also the white paper which was produced on the disaggregation by geographic location. May 2023, there's a focus on convening a virtual seminar with members of SDG custodian agencies and member states, and this will promote the case studies and examples of geospatially produced SDG indicators by various countries. And ongoing work includes convening meetings with countries implementing the SDG Geospatial Roadmap, and this will check on progress, identify areas of improvement, and foster the sharing of experiences and case studies among various countries. Ongoing work also includes participating and promoting the work at regional and international fora. Item 2 is focused on an April 2023 deadline. So this is to develop a story map to showcase how geospatial information helps with production, monitoring, and dissemination of geospatially enabled SDGs. And this will consolidate the SDG assessment matrix, and national case studies will also be showcased. And again, it will identify the importance of geospatially enabling the SDGs. And it also focuses on how countries validate the outputs of Earth observations in the production and monitoring of SDG data. Ongoing work also includes strengthening coordination and coherence of geospatially enabled SDGs. So this is with other subsidiary bodies through bilateral meetings. And then lastly, ongoing work involves liaising with the IAEG-SDGs and responding to their requests. So in terms of strengthening coordination on geospatially enabled SDGs, there's a focus on three main areas. Firstly, communication and promotion. So we can communicate the outputs of relevant groups to the IAEG SDGs, what the key messages are, inclusive of the SDG geospatial roadmap and progress in terms of implementing the geospatial roadmap. In terms of coordination, engaging with other relevant groups is important. So the co-chairs have initiated discussions with expert groups on the integration of statistical and geospatial information and the Committee of Experts on Big Data. Looking at capacity development, the working group welcomes the work of the Secretariat in supporting Member States with implementing the SDGs Geospatial Roadmap in Burundi, Kyrgyzstan, and Rwanda. And it welcomes the IAEG SDGs to urge the Secretariat to conduct further capacity development workshops. So looking at disaggregation by geographic location, why is this important? Well, what the disaggregation by geography does is it helps to shine a light on trends and patterns, making the SDGs actionable at the local level. So this is fundamental to the UN principle of leaving no one behind. Disaggregation by geographic location can be in terms of small areas. So these can be administrative areas, and we can look at things like urban, rural areas and divisions between urban and rural areas. But it's also particularly important in terms of the environmental SDG data. And this is emphasized in things like natural physical boundaries such as river basins or ecosystems where we don't have a natural tabular format for the data. So for instance, pollution or river basins transcend any political boundaries. So looking at this geospatially is particularly important. The use of disaggregation in terms of the SDGs provides a mechanism to achieve a greater analytical potential of the data. So looking at accessible and timely tools for the generation of information allows more accurate and real-time decision-making. It also, in combination with other variables such as gender, age breakdown, etc., and it allows hidden disparities to be highlighted. And this is particularly important in terms of vulnerable groups in the population and marginalized people. And just in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, in Ireland, we successfully showed the geospatial breakdown of areas or hotspots where COVID-19 was. And we were also able to do a time series on the map showing how this changed from various week to week. So this was important in providing information to the government in terms of outbreaks of COVID-19. At the previous meeting of the IAEG-SDG, the working group was requested to provide further guidance on disaggregation by geographic location. So to this end, the working group has developed a white paper on disaggregation by geographic location to respond to this request. Here we see maps of Malawi, and the first map on the left shows the population broken down by administrative area. And what this shows is the dark areas where there is a dense population, and then the lighter areas where the population is sparse. The second map shows the degree of urbanization. So what we see with the red areas where the cities are located. The brown area shows dense town areas, and then the yellow areas would show the suburban areas. Then with the dark green, we see villages, and this moves to light green where we have the rural population, and then the extremely light green color shows areas of sparse or no population. The third map shows the built-up areas, so we can see where the buildings are highly concentrated. And then the final map on the right-hand side shows the population in terms of 100-meter square grids. So we can see geospatial information can highlight different areas which need to be addressed in terms of planning and policy decisions. Here we see maps of Zambia taken from the census, and the map on the left-hand side, the purpley pink map, shows the population in terms of density. So the higher populations are shown in the dark shaded areas, and then in the light shaded areas we see the sparser populations. The map in the middle, on the upper middle, shows the proportion of the population aged 18 to 24 who are in a marriage before the age of 18. So we can see areas again where the percentage of women is quite high in the dark colours, and then the light colours where the percentage is quite low. Looking at this variable in terms of population numbers is the map on the bottom right-hand side. So this gives the actual number of women who have been in a marriage before the age of 18. So we can compare the densities in one map with the actual numbers in another map. And if we look at the graph, then on the bottom left-hand side, it provides the same information, but it doesn't give the visual effect that we can see from the regions on a map. So again, this highlights the importance of the geospatial information in terms of disseminating the SDG data. So again, in terms of the work that the working group has done on disaggregation by geographic location, we see a white paper has been produced, and a draft of this white paper has been provided to the IAEG-SDGs. And the proposal from the working group for the IAEG to submit it to the 54th UN Statistical Commission. So the white paper is divided into a number of chapters. So these are shown here in the infographic. Firstly, there's an introduction to the white paper and explains the background. Then in the next chapter, it explains what disaggregation is by geographic location and why it is important to the SDGs. The next chapter then looks at what is needed to produce disaggregated data by geographic location. The chapter following looks at what are the limitations and challenges using geographically disaggregated data for SDGs. And the final chapter looks at producing and using geographically disaggregated data for the SDGs. And then the final section summarizes the paper. So if the white paper has been circulated, so this is the table of contents. So if you want to look at the detailed information in the white paper, please do and respond with your comments, which a number of countries have done and a number of organizations. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mary. So we'll open the floor to questions and comments on the work of the Geospatial Working Group. Okay, I see none. So we'll move on to the task team on sustainable tourism. And that's me. So excellent, thank you. So you can go to the next slide, please. Just what I'll talk about today. So I'll give a bit of a reasoning behind the creation of this task team. Then I'll provide a quick overview of the objectives of the group, its memberships, the working modalities, and the tentative work plan and objectives, and the timeline. So next slide. So if you can recall, there are two targets related to tourism in the SDGs. One is under Goal 8 and the other is under Goal 12. The tourism-related target under Goal 8 is by 2030, devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. And the target under Goal 12 is develop and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts for sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. And so when the framework was adopted in 2017, under targets 8.9 and 12.b, there were a total of 3 indicators. Under 8.9, 2 of the indicators were 8.9.1, tourism direct GDP as a proportion of total GDP and the growth rate, and 8.9.2, proportion of jobs in sustainable tourism industries out of total tourism jobs. And under target 12B, there was 1 indicator, the number of sustainable tourism strategies or policies and implemented action plans with agreed monitoring and evaluation tools. So that's where we were. Next slide, please. Going into the 2020 review. And then during the 2020 comprehensive review, excuse me, UNWTO proposed to the IAEG some adjustments to indicator 8.9.2. They submitted a proposal to the IAEG to replace the original indicator 8.9.2, proportion of jobs in sustainable tourism industries out of total tourism jobs, with the number of employees in tourism industries. The rationale for the proposed change was that sustainable tourism industries are difficult to define, and WTO did not consider it feasible or conceptually warranted to develop statistical definition or infrastructure to derive the indicator. During the deliberations at the 10th meeting of the IAEG in October 2019, the IAEG did not accept the proposed replacement indicator on jobs in tourism. The group felt that the replacement indicator did not directly measure sustainable tourism, not taking into account the sustainability component of sustainable tourism, and that it was closely correlated with the tourism direct GDP, indicator 8.9.1. and would therefore be redundant. Furthermore, as UNWTO was not working on defining sustainable tourism, and thus the original indicator was not measurable, and UNWTO had noted that this was not measurable, the group decided to delete indicator 8.9.2 from the global indicator framework. This then left a single indicator for target 8.9. And just note that the tourism indicator for Goal 12 remains. UNWTO also suggested including a new indicator 8.9.3, energy use by tourism industries, as a measure of the environmental dimension of sustainable tourism, so that all three dimensions of sustainability would be represented in the global indicator framework and in indicators 8.9.1, 8.9.2, and 8.9.3 respectively. The IAG decided against this, the inclusion of this additional indicator, principally due to the desire not to increase the size of the global indicator framework, meaning that very few additional indicators would be accepted. It was also felt that this indicator would be extremely difficult for most countries to calculate, and that it did not address the target directly, as energy use could increase or decrease for reasons not related to sustainability, but rather driven by the changing size of the tourism industry. So in the end, we were left with the single indicator under 8.9.1, tourism direct GDP as a proportion of total GDP. Next slide. In March 2021, at the 52nd session, the decision of the Statistical Commission, they encouraged the IAEG to continue to implement and refine indicators, and requested the group to work with relevant custodian agencies to develop and test a methodology for indicators on sustainable tourism in preparation for the 2025 comprehensive review. And noted that this indicator was extremely important to LDCs, landlocked, least developed countries, and small island developing states. In February and March of this year, at the 53rd session, the issue of sustainable tourism came up again. And the Statistical Commission asked the IAG to work in close coordination with the custodian agency on a proposal for indicators on sustainable tourism to better monitor 8.9 and report the progress to the Commission at the 54th session. And the Commission also approved the work program of the group and requested the inclusion of work on sustainable tourism. Next slide, please. So this was the genesis for the creation of this task team on sustainable tourism. So following that, in the March meeting, the IAEG received updates from UNWTO on their work on measuring sustainability in tourism and discussed the various options to move forward. And in between April and July, the IAG decided to create its task team on sustainable tourism and invited members who expressed interest in joining the task team. And the first meeting of this task team was in September of this year. So the objectives of the group are as follows. To build consensus through discussions and develop a detailed proposal for sustainable tourism indicators to better monitor Target 8.9. And the work should be completed in time for the comprehensive review to take place to be ready for 2025. The members of the group are Canada, Grenada, Hungary, Malaysia, Trinidad and Tobago, Austria, as co-chair of the UNWTO Committee on Statistics, Spain as the other co-chair of that same group, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, Fiji, Samoa, the Seychelles, UNWTO, ESCAP, the South Pacific Tourism Organization, and of course, UNSD is the secretariat of that group. So, we meet only virtually. There were no in-person meetings, and the frequency is quarterly or more frequently as dictated by the workload. And of course, there'll be intermeeting collaboration through emails and various other platforms. The governance is co-chairs are elected by the members, and UNSD, as I mentioned before, will serve as the secretariat. Our timeline is as follows. I already talked about August and September. We had our first meeting. And during that first meeting, we talked about the governance, the terms of reference, the timeline in the work plan. The next meeting of the group is scheduled for the end of this month, and at that time there will be a review of the possible indicators, and the group will prepare updates for the StatCom in March. You can see over the 2023 period that the group will do the majority of its work there as they look to prepare a draft proposal for consultations, and the group hopes to be finished this and submit it to the IAEG in May of 2024 during the comprehensive review. So that is everything, and I will open the floor to any comments or questions on the work of this group. Center for Socioeconomic Development.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Just wanted to ask you in general the question as to task teams and new indicators. Is this now closed, or is there still a potential to add a new task team or to create a new task team and to create an additional indicator? Thanks for letting us know.
Well, this was the creation of this task group was based on a decision by the Statistical Commission. And so that's where we have got our direction for the work. The creation of task teams for additional indicators wouldn't happen. The comprehensive review is the place where indicators could potentially, I'll be very careful in my choice of words, could potentially be added, modified, refined. And that we'll talk about that this afternoon in the timeline for the 2025 comprehensive review. Okay, I see no other flags. Oh, I'm sorry, SPC, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for that update on the Sustainable Tourism Working Group. Very interesting from the SID's perspective. Just noting that 2025 will be quite late in the process, and it might be difficult then for countries to get this indicator up and running and monitored by 2030. Is there an opportunity within that working group to, in parallel with developing the indicator and metadata for some countries, to be testing data collection as you go along? Thanks.
Thank you. It's a very good question. I think there's no reason why that could not happen. So I think that in order to be ready for the 2025 review, the indicator will have to have been tested. It has to be accepted. So we would have to do that for sure. Okay, we'll close item 7 and move to item 8, data availability review of the SDG indicators and corresponding updates to the tier classification. And I will turn it to Daniel Esty from UNSD again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll be presenting a brief overview of the data availability. This is something that we do every year, tied to classifying the data sets availability into their tiers. So we currently have tier 1 and tier 2 indicators in the global database. So we run this every year to graduate some. If some don't fall behind, to be declassified to tier 2. So let me just see my share is. I have to share it again. Okay. Screen is not showing. Let me see. Okay. Not coffee break at all. Just give me a minute, so something is happening with the.
We did have some messages that colleagues at the back could not see. There's a lot of empty seats up front, so if you want to come up front and so you can see the presentations, please feel free to do so.
Okay. It's now responding. Okay. With the tier classification, we have two, as I mentioned earlier. So the first one is tier one, where we have data and metadata available. And there is the additional criteria to have 50% coverage of availability and population. So this is criteria that's been used so far in graduating some tier two indicators to tier one. To refresh your memory on tier two, we have data and metadata, but not availability at 50% level in terms of coverage and both in population and the data set itself. So this year we have proposed 14 indicators to be graduating from tier 2 to tier 1. A couple of them would be a mix where some of the series will be tier 1, some of the series will remain tier 2. So you see the list here from 152 and 1152, which is a multi-purpose indicator. So you see the available countries, it's 150 out of 193. So you see how we classify. There is good coverage in terms of country and in terms of population. So 182, 562, all the list here. For if you take 182 as an example, it's an indicator where we have at the global level good coverage for the disaggregation by education. So we don't have data on that indicator disaggregated by health or social protection. So we are suggesting this to be a mixed upgrade where the first one, the education part should be tier 1. The other two, since we don't have data coverage, they will remain as tier 2, even if we have the data and metadata in place. Most of them are like that. 621 is very similar to like 182. So we have A, the safely managed sanitation service, need to be upgraded to tier 1 because it qualifies. But the B, the hand washing, so we're still not meeting the criteria. So that will remain tier 2. The rest, you see, all there are upgraded to tier 1. So you see the column of coverage. So a good number of coverage in terms of country and then the population also. So from last year to this year, we have 231, as you know, indicators, but we have data for 219 so far. So we don't have data for 12. Last year it was 18, so we were down from 18 to 12. This is a good progress. Hoping the 12 unique indicators that are missing data right now would have some availability in the next slide. So we have 4. We're expecting updates proposed by custodian agencies in Q4 of this year, and 3 in 2023. 4 indicators, we're waiting responses for custodian agencies. They are also trying to finalize the possibility of this data to be available. We don't have any established data yet for 1781. So that's the anomaly. The next slides are showing which indicators and which custodian agency is looking after them and the possible date. So if you take 1B1, so this is UNICEF, who is a custodian agency, and they're saying in early 2023 they will have some data to be reported. 241, there is some also FAO. There's possibility of getting some data sets in Q4 of 2022. So these are the hopes that we will reduce the 12 again back to lesser numbers. We haven't heard back from a number of them here: 5222, 1131, and 1132, which no status update so far. So custodian agencies will be reporting, and then will be reporting as they come in. 1172 is also UNODC is the custodian. They're hoping something will come in May 2023. 1571 and 15C1, that's from UNODC, and so this is also Q2 of 2023. We have 1633, that's also expected to come. It's custodian agencies as UNDP, OECD, and UNODC. So they're hoping some data set will come in Q4 of 2022. Similar for 1641, 1662, and 1672. So we're expecting some data to come either in end of 2022 or next year in 2023. So this is something that we follow up from our side with custodian agencies to get the data and then publish to our global database as soon as they come in with some validation happening on our side. That's a quick, brief update on the data availability. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll open the floor to any questions or comments to Daniel. FAO?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. The fact that we have one of these indicators for which we have no data. We have done various initiatives in order to improve the coverage of this indicator. And we probably will have some data to report before the end of the year, as we have already communicated to the UNSD. The problem is that it's a long way to go before we reach a sufficient coverage in order to conduct global monitoring. And to me, this is the situation not only of this indicator. And we shouldn't look only to indicators that are with zero reporting rate, but also that are with very limited reporting rate. And ask us ourselves now that we are midway to 2030, if a possible alternative solution should be searched for in order to ensure that global monitoring can be done. So we have proposed to have a discussion on potential proxies for difficult indicators to collect. And I don't know when this discussion will be taken. I mean, this was, in my view, a very good opportunity. The first time that we have an in-person meeting after such a long time, in which we had only online meetings that, of course, are not the best way to communicate, are more one-way communication only. I think that we need to have a discussion about these indicators as soon as possible, because also in view of the upcoming comprehensive review. Thank you.
I'm taking that as a comment. Maybe Francesca, if she wants to add some more. Karen.
Pietro, we're going to talk a little bit about proxies this afternoon, so we haven't forgotten you. And I wanted to touch base with you at lunch today about one of the things that you presented to the IAEG, I believe, in September or October. India?
Thank you, Chair. The tier classification is done mainly based on standard availability of standard methodology and the availability of data. And we know that the data on SDG indicator flows to UNSD through custodian agencies. So sometimes the problem arises when the data has not been verified or endorsed by the country, especially the model data. So I'm flagging this issue because the focus is now shifting towards the use of non-traditional data sources, methodologies. So such type of situation may arise more in the future. So submission is that an SOP from UNSD may be circulated, or if it already is there, maybe recirculated, taking into consideration the recent developments. Thank you.
Yes, this is a known issue. Then there is also a guideline that was produced, but yeah, I will take it as a comment on sharing those resources, but they are available for custodian agencies also.
Okay, I see no other flags or hands up. Thank you, Daniel. We'll go to item 9 now. Refinements of the Global SDG Framework, review of proposals, and Yonggi Min from UNSD will walk us through these.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I would like to present the 4 refinement that approved by the IEG and which is going to be presented to the next Statistical Commission. Oh, no, it's refinement. I put on yesterday. So just want to refresh the criteria of the IEG defined for the annual refinement of the SDG indicator. Mainly the refinement does not change too much of the SDG measurement and the meaning of the indicator. So basically there are 4 criteria for the refinement: specifying or correcting a unit of measurement, clarification of term used in the indicator, spelling or other editorial changes, and any other minor issue that do not substantially change the indicator meanings. Next slide, please. So the IEG agreed to the 4 refinement changes. The first is on 532, the proportions of girls and women aged 15 to 49 years who have undergone female genital mutilation and cutting by age. So the proposed change is deleting cutting. This is proposed by the custodian agency, UNICEF. UNICEF would like to be clear that this editor does not represent any change to the measurement of the indicator, nor the scope of practice encompassed. So the definition of the indicator will not be changed. So the second proposed refinement is on 10.7.2, is a number of countries with migration policies that facilitate orderly, safely, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people. And the refinement will change from the number to proportion of country. So this suggestion of the indicator name refinement was brought up by a member of the IAEG-SDG in the metadata subgroup review, and then the custodian agency also in agreement with the suggestion. The third refinement is on 12.7.1 and the degree of sustainable public procurement policies and action plan implementations. And so the suggested change is to number of country implementing sustainable public procurement policies and action plan. This refinement was presented by UNEP in April 2021. It was missed in the batch of refinement for present for the 53rd session of UN Statistical Commission. So we will include it in this round of the refinement proposal. And the last refinement is on 15.4.2, the indicators of mountain green cover index, and the FAO proposed to have two sub-indicators. One is the mountain green cover index, and the B is a proportion of degraded mountain land. So FAO presented this proposal, proposed revised metadata in May and 2022, and the IAEG approved the proposed change in the methodology and the refinement of the indicator. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Yonggi. Do we have any comments or questions about the refinements for this year? I see no hands or flags. So we'll move on to item 10, metadata, streamlining the metadata update process. Oh, Uganda, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My question to the presenter is, and maybe to NSD, when do these changes when are they usually communicated in case there are changes? Because we know you do a lot of work, but don't be surprised to come to my counter and you find we have different set of indicators to the ones you have, or even to any other, compared to any other counter. So when such changes are made, when are they communicated and who are they communicated to? Yes. Even in number of indicators, sometimes they keep changing. They are 232, then 234, then, yes.
This is we conduct this exercise once a year. Basically, with the custodian agency, all the IAEG can propose the refinements throughout the year, but we only present this to the Statistical Commission annually. Then the Commission approves the refinement in March during the session, and so then we officially adopt the refinement name. And the number indicator hasn't been changed since 2020 when we done the comprehensive review, and before the 2020 we have 232 indicators. After the 2020 comprehensive review, we have 231 unique indicator because there are some repeated, we call multi-purpose indicator. So the total number is 244, and that number hasn't been changed since 2020.
Thank you. I don't see any other flags or hands. So we'll go to item 10, metadata, streamlining the metadata update process. Yonggi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So this presentation mainly is to try to communicate how to streamlining the metadata update process with the custodian agencies. Next slide, please. So this proposal seeks to make improvement to the current process for any request for significant changes to metadata so that it become more predictable, or the end-to-end process and indicative timeline are understood for the custodian agency and the member of the IAEG from the very beginning. And we'll present a user-friendly interface. The documents that need to be submitted, assembled to complete and available online. and will be timely. So our requests for significant change to metadata deal with promptly by USD and decision making and by the IAEG-SDG, also follow a systematic timeline and try to be efficient. The role and the responsibilities of stakeholder, which is the custodian agencies, the IAEG-SDG, and USD are clear, and thus enabling decision making with the shortest possible timeline and a streamlined effort by all. Next slide, please. So basically, what we review the criteria for metadata update requests that need to be reviewed by the IAEG. The current criteria are the following: when the custodian agency revises the metadata, and we need to look into are there any changes in concepts and definition, are there changes in the methods of computation, and are there any changes in the name and descriptions of indicators? And are there any changes that may impact the definition or meaning of the indicator and the comparability of the data with the previously submitted data? So this is the criteria. If the change of the metadata meet one of the criteria, we qualify the significant changes that need to go through the IAEG review and approval. Next slide, please. So the streamlined the metadata update process is following. We request the custodian agency submit the metadata request to USDD, and then USD will decide if the request change metadata are significant and require other IAEG attention based on the established criteria. And if we think it's a significant, the USD will forward this update request package to the IAEG-SDG member for their review. This should be at least 4 weeks in advance of any IAEG member meeting, because the IAEG need to consult their national experts and also the country they represent. So this metadata will be reviewed in the next available IAEG meeting, a monthly meeting, and then we invite the custodian agency to present the nature of the changes, the nature and reason of the metadata update request to the IAEG members, and then IAEG member can ask questions or make decisions. And we gave the IAEG 2 more weeks particularly for the member who cannot attend the monthly meeting and to provide comments, questions, and to the custodian agency, and the IAEG member will decide they either approve or reject or require more time to review the metadata upon request. Next slide, please. So in summary, what's new? So a section will be added to the metadata repository web page with clear instructions and documents for processing requests for significant updates to the metadata by agency. So members will have about 4 to 6 weeks for review the metadata request. If there's a question, it can be up to 10 weeks. A standard agenda item on metadata update requests will be added to each the IAEG member meeting to discuss any new requests and decide on requests that discussed at the previous meeting. So this is to try to streamline and shorten the timeline for any metadata updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonggi. Do we have any questions or comments about the streamlining of the metadata review process? I see none. So Yonggi's going to present again on the metadata subgroup work.
Thank you, Chair. So I will again to present the IAEG-SDG metadata subgroup work. This metadata subgroup was established a few years ago, try to address the current and the future issue and identified in the metadata documents and aiming to improve the overall quality of the metadata for the SDG indicator to facilitate the better SDG indicator implementation for countries. So basically, the group will conduct a review of all metadata with regard to inconsistency, missing definitions, missing sub-indicators, and other information that's critical to understanding the indicators and the computation method. And the group also aimed to ensure coherence between metadata and data reported in the global SDG indicator database. So the following current and former IAEG members are part of the subgroup. They are the Canada, Colombia, Denmark, France, and Germany, Ireland, Malaysia, and Sweden. So this work is also linked to initiatives such as the metadata template developed by the IAEG-SDG working group on SDMX and translation projects by countries and partner agency, and the work on updating the e-handbook on SDG indicators. Next slide, please. So currently there are 241 metadata files in the repository, although there's 231 unique indicator, but some indicator have multiple metadata files. The metadata subgroup has already reviewed 131 metadata file in the first batch. They provide comments and suggest edits to the metadata file and was sent to the custody agency on 3rd February 2022. 94 of the 131 indicator file sent to agency has been uploaded, and there's still 37 still not reviewed by the agencies. Next slide, please. So the metadata subgroup is currently review the remaining 110 metadata file in the final batch. So aim to finish this work by the end of November 2022. Comments and suggested edits to this metadata file will be sent to the agency towards the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. And the 37 metadata file from the first batch will also be resent to the custody agency. So we list them in the previous slides, so you can find if your indicator is among one of them. Next slide. So I'm not going to go to details. There's a lot of details of what the group look at. Basically, missing sections should be complete. Metadata need to refer to the series included in the database, and a lot of the detail you can find in the slides. And we just want to reminder of the review criteria used by the subgroup. Basically, the first criteria is editorial and the grammatic check. For the editorial review, the sentence need to make sense, and is all the required information included in the document, are all relevant section complete. And for the grammar and spelling review, and the sentence need to be complete and word are spelled correctly. And the second is consistent checking. The group will check if the metadata complete. Does the document contain the necessary information for the collection of the sub-indicators? Does the metadata include the computation methods? Does the metadata include anything else that should be provided to understand and compute the indicator? And the last criteria is a coherent check. Are the series report in the UN Global SDG database compliant with the metadata? Is the indicator in line with the metadata? Is the data report in the global database a proxy? If so, it's need to be noted in the metadata. Is a unit measurement correctly provided? So this is the criteria that the IAEG has been used in the past 2 years. So thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions.
So we'll open the floor to any questions or comments on this. Okay, I see none. So we'll go to the final presentation before we break for lunch. Indicator 1.1.1, update with the new 2017 PPP and its impact. Umar Sarajuddin from the World Bank will present to us. We'll give him a moment to come up to the podium.
Thank you so much for allowing me to present here. It is really nice being here, being together with you. So I do have 3 things going against me when I talk here, and 1 thing going for me. So the things against me are I'm kind of jet lagged and not my usual spirited self. Then I'm speaking right before lunch, so you want me to get done. And finally, I am talking about metadata, right? And kind of hard to be too enthusiastic about it, right? I mean, but hopefully I'm talking about something that is important. So that's something going for me. As you know, that the target 1.1 is the elimination of extreme poverty across the world. It's a global indicator, and it has been measured by the $90 a day line. And the World Bank has recently revised the international poverty line used to track SDG 1.1. So we now take into account the most recent purchasing power parities, which were the survey was conducted in 2017, collected then, and released, published in 2020. So this update means that the international comparisons of costs across countries now will be using the most recent and most accurate price information. And within the SDG context, it isn't new to update the poverty line. Some of you will remember the SDG 1.1, when we started off, it was defined along the $25 a day line based on the 2011 PPPs. Then the 2017, based on 2005 PPPs, I'm sorry. And then the 2011 PPPs were adopted, the line changed to $1.90. And now we are proposing it be changed to $2.15. But this change doesn't mean that the new extreme poverty line is any higher, and therefore more people will be counted as living under extreme poverty. The increase primarily reflects price changes across 2017 and 2011 in nominal dollar values. So you will see that the global poverty rate, due to the updated poverty lines, the change in it is negligible. A quick bit of history in that the dollar a day international poverty line was introduced in 1990 as a research project. It was subsequently adopted for the MDGs, of course. And the international poverty line, it reflects the typical national poverty lines of some of the poorest countries in the world. And the lines indicate the minimum costs of basic food and non-food needs. And the measure later on became the first target of the SDGs also. Now, in defining the international poverty line, the World Bank always relied on countries' own assessment of who is poor, the national poverty lines. So the international poverty line is a very frugal standard. It's a pretty low line. We take the poverty standards of the poorest countries in the world. And it is well understood that as countries get richer, the poverty lines rise as the cost of participating in society increases. And the international poverty line does not capture this. That's just not its point. It deliberately wants to track what is happening to the extreme poorest. Now, how does the revision of the PPPs affect the international poverty line? Now, the national lines, poverty lines, and household consumption are reported in local currencies. And we use the purchasing power exchange rates to convert them to the same currency and account for price differences people face. And the PPPs, the use of it is expected to be and understood to be better than market exchange rates for various reasons. For example, for the exchange value of non-tradables like services and so on. And the new PPPs are collected periodically every 4 or 5 years, most recently in 2017. And you'll see that with the when PPPs are updated, the international poverty line is updated also. So 1990 started with $1 a day, then over a period of time, it has changed. Now, there was a process that we went through to make this decision to move from 2011 to 2017, because it is very important, right? This is a global goal, so we can't be changing the goalposts. So we had to do a lot of analysis for that, and a lot of consultation. The decision was made by the vice president of one of the major groups in the bank and the chief economist of the World Bank. And there were a lot of engagements. There's a global poverty working group within the World Bank, and we sought input from a couple of people: Stefan Durkon of Oxford University, Francisco Ferreira of LSE, Anna Revenga, Brookings Institution, Lawrence Chandy, UNICEF. And the technical work was also presented to the ICP Technical Advisory Group. And there was also a technical background paper that has been published by my colleague Dean Joliffe and several others. Now, the method that was used, let me talk a bit about it. So the $90 poverty line and the $25 poverty line were derived as the average national poverty line of the 15 poor countries. This was defined in a paper by Martin Rebellion in 2009, using national poverty lines that were available at that time. Now, the method used for the 215 line, we use a larger, newer, and more comparable sample of national poverty lines. So it is defined as the median national poverty line for low-income countries, and which yields 215 in terms of 2017 PPPs. Now, are we changing the method? No, we are not. And just as a robustness check, if you use the newer national power lines and employ the 2011 PPPs, it would still give you $1.90, right? So then that shows that there is a robustness. And also, does it matter that we used low-income countries, right, as a benchmark? Because you may think, okay, you know, what is that line? What is it all about? Again, if you take kind of rank countries by their incomes and take the 11th to 41st country, apply the same standard, you still get 215. So that should give us comfort that this line is robust. Just a little bit of a graphical representation here. We look at the poverty lines across GDP per capita, and you see that the poverty lines keep going up, right, as countries get richer. And the blue dots are the poverty lines for the low-income countries. So the median gives us 215. This is what is used to measure extreme poverty. But the World Bank also has a couple of other international poverty lines with higher benchmarks. And for middle-income countries, it is 365. For lower middle-income countries, for upper middle-income countries, 685, and high-income countries, 2435. Now, what does it do to the levels and the trends? And reassuringly, not much. You can see that if we track global poverty from 1990 to 2019, there is a difference when we start off, but then they converge as we come to the present, and the trend is the same. Bigger gap in sub-Saharan Africa, but again, trend is the similar. And this table should kind of sum it up. It gives you, in a sense, the poverty changes in 2019. That is the last we can report for this target. And from the world, the difference is 0.3 percentage points. So it would have been 8.7% using the $90 line. With the 215 line, it's 8.4%, a difference of 20 million people. Sub-Saharan Africa, the change in poverty is of 3 percentage points and 35 million poor. And this is because the cost of living in Sub-Saharan Africa was lower, according to the 2017 PPPs than the 2011 PPPs. And another notable difference is Europe and Central Asia, where you see it almost doubles. And that's an artifact of the fact that Uzbekistan now participates in the PPPs, and whereas in 2011 round it didn't. But we presume this is an improvement. So that's kind of what the implications are. And if you just give me a minute, I said, why is it important, right? I kind of asserted that this is important, and I just want to highlight just a few findings from the Poverty and Shared Prosperity report that the World Bank just launched last month. Is that while we stop in 2019, if you look, we have also done some work based on nowcasting and forecasting. Where do we stand now? So there is a lot of interest in that, right? Where are we now? And what our estimates suggest is that during COVID, it was a huge setback. About 70 million people who otherwise wouldn't have been poor became extreme poor, right? And this is actually, since 1997, this is the only time that extreme poverty actually reversed in the world. And since the MDGs have been tracked since 1990, again, those were the only two occasions when poverty actually increased. And we did a bit of backcasting from beforehand, and that actually suggests since World War II, this is the largest setback. Same has happened with inequality, and you can check out the report for that. And our forecasting actually points to a very challenging outlook going forward. It suggests that in 2030, actually the global target, right now the way things are going, will be missed. It'll be around 7%. So again, I'm kind of raising this issue is that our understanding of how poverty has been declining just has changed in the course of a very short time, and we do have a lot of work going ahead. So I just wanted to mention that because we are statisticians, we do the measurement, but our work also means something beyond just being counters. So thank you.
Thank you, Umar. We'll open the floor to any questions or comments to Umar. Italy?
May I? So thanks, Chair. So many thanks for this updating that is crucial according to my vision. But I have a curiosity. I know that the World Bank approach is using the like-to-like choice of goods in order to build up this PPP index. And we know that poor generally has different markets and different prices than the average of the population. Let me say like this. So I understand and accept that for doing comparisons, we need to have this two dot something dollars line and so on. But are there any issues, reflections, criticism, and maybe way forward to take into account the fact that it is well known that maybe poor has special PPPs?
I believe ILO has a question as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Omar, for this presentation. As you know, there are implications for the ILO as well. So the data for part of this indicator is supplied by the ILO on the employed population as below the poverty line. So you have changed now to 2.15, so which means we'll also have to recalculate our data. So I just wondering about the timelines. When do you envisage this to be available so that we can have it in sync to make our data also available at the same time? Thanks.
I don't see any other hands, so Umar, please.
So your point on the poor having a different basket is well taken. And this is a bit more easily done at the national level. When we do the work, even at the national level, it's difficult, right? Because we use the CPI and so on. So here, I just somehow, my memory isn't serving me that well. There was some work done, I think, and I'll just check right now. I'm 95% certain, but 5% uncertainty. There is a work by Angus Deaton and Olivier Dupriez on using the PPPs for the poorest, and they showed it wasn't making that much of a difference. But I don't know if that paper was strong enough that it is considered a settled issue versus not, but I haven't seen it being explored much this time around. So I would like to look whether it is, right? But I think your point is very well taken on this. And on the question on the working poor, Ritesh, we can share it right now. So I think I'll, just after the meeting, we can just get in touch and we can take it forward.
Thank you, Umar. I see no other questions. But before we break for lunch, we thought maybe we could do a group picture since it's the first time that we've been together in 3 years. So if everybody would come up, there's a little dance floor up in the front here. If we could go up there, we'll take some pictures of the group all together. And that's the big family, not just the IAG members, but all of us.